Hello and welcome to today's A-Team Group webinar on the role of data quality and data governance in optimizing analytics. My name is Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor at A-Team Group and I'll moderate today's webinar. Our expert speakers today are Sarah Belsham, Analytics Director at RSM, Sumi Shin, Enterprise Data Governance at Northern Trust Corporation, Martijn Groot, Vice President of Product Management at Alveo, and Alex Brown, Chief Technology Officer at Didactics. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in just a moment, but first just a few hints and tips if you're watching the webinar. To the right of your video, you'll see two panels. One is named polls, and we'll be running 3 polls today, so do please place your votes and let us know your thoughts on the topics that we're going to poll on. And in the other panel, a Q&A. If you have any questions for our experts, please put them there and we'll answer as many as possible during the webinar. We'll do it as we go along, so just put your questions up just as soon as you have them and we'll try and answer them as we go along. So that's it about our housekeeping. Let me come over and ask our speakers to introduce themselves. Sarah, please would you kick off here?
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So as you mentioned, I am Analytics Director at RSM. I have 25 plus years experience in digital transformation projects, so a lot of ERP work, and then more latterly data and analytics initiatives, both working in industry and also in professional services, so consulting and supporting our clients. And at RSM, I'm responsible for our consulting services and also all of our internal data analytics initiatives.
Thank you very much. Sumi.
Hi, I'm with Northern Trust right now, implementing data governance in a more federated model, supporting the digital strategy and also modernization of applications. Been doing data management, architecture and strategy and implementations for over 20 years.
Thank you very much. Martijn.
Yes, thanks, Sarah, and hello, everyone. My name is Martijn Groot at Alveo Technology. Also been in data management, information services for 25 years. Background in math, coming through IT, risk systems, evaluations into managed data services and data management technology.
Thank you. And Alex.
There, I'm Alex Brown. I'm CTO at Didactics, and at Didactics we provide a data quality platform and data matching platform that empowers our customers to build robust analytics on top of good quality data.
Okay, fine. All issues we're going to talk about throughout the webinar, so thanks all. But first, let's start with an audience poll question. The question is, how mature are the analytics deployed and used at your organization? So I'm sure you can see that on screen, so please do vote. And while you do that, let me come to Alex to talk a little bit about how he sees the maturity of analytics in financial markets and where there's variance across different types of financial institutions.
Hi. Yep. I'd probably say there's quite a big bit of variance, and it probably also depends on where you look in the business. So different business areas are certainly more mature than others. So for example, front office revenue generating centers have been using advanced analytics for years, if not decades. But the high cost of highly skilled data scientists were always offset by profits there. But it simply wasn't really justifiable for back office cost centers. But now all that's changing. Advanced analytics are becoming easier and cheaper to implement. You no longer have to be a Python guru. Most firms have already got some sort of investment in business intelligence for self-service analytics already. And business leaders in back office departments are certainly more analytics savvy. And they see all this clever stuff that's happening elsewhere, and they say, "Look, why can't we have that?" And I think it's also driven by necessity. So increasing data volumes and complexities just need to be boiled down to actionable nuggets of information, regardless of whether you're a profit center or a cost center.
Okay, thank you, Martijn. What would you say there? What do you sort of see when you're out in the market?
Yeah, I think a lot of the analytics themselves and a lot of the models are, I think, mature. There are, of course, always new developments, but in many cases, the math or the statistics has been there a long time. What has changed indeed is, I think, the computing power and the wider availability of machine learning libraries like Keras, like the sort of Python that Alex mentioned, I think where we are far less mature is in how we embed those models in workflows, in data flows. Because what has changed on the data side, indeed, is there's a lot more raw material to work with. And I think an increasing appreciation to acknowledge the metadata parts or the data quality in a broad sense, not just the typical quality aspects, but permissions, lineage audit, use cases. And I think some firms have learned the hard way that you need to keep track of that. Of course, the challenge, I guess we'll get into that, is to integrate good data and good analytics. And as you automate more and more to make sure that the data acted on by the models, as well as the models chosen themselves, are fit for purpose. There's certainly a lot of variation that I can see among firms when it comes to the maturity of those capabilities. Some have a sort of central pipe or sort of funnel or function to source and provision users and models with data. Others may have a so-called federated model, right, which is a nice term, but sometimes also means a lack of organization with sort of redundant work as a consequence.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So let's see the poll results, if we may. Martijn, can you comment on that? The largest number, 50%, somewhat mature, 25% not very mature, 17%. Does that ring true with you, or does that surprise you?
Doesn't really surprise me. I guess it's more sort of a bit sitting on the fence, maybe somewhat mature. I guess, yeah, in some sense, mature here and less mature elsewhere. It probably depends on where you look in an organization. I think still a 17% that says very mature. I think which is maybe a little bit more than I would expect. But yeah, by and large, this corresponds with what I've seen.
Okay, that's great. So staying with you, Martijn, tell us a little bit about the types of analytics that are in play in our industry at the moment, and what are their key use cases?
Yeah, so a bit of a broad question, but in my role at Alveo, I mean, we focus on let's say the onboarding, the mastering, the preparation and the distribution of primarily pricing and reference data. And I think there are a couple of ways to look at how you organize or how you classify types of analytics. Offhand, I would make the distinction between analytics in operational situations versus, say, more research or an explorative case, so maybe front office research, pre-trade analysis versus post-trade operations, where you probably further automate the process using analytics, and you may introduce some level of automated decision making based on models, right? As opposed to throwing lots of data and models to find new patterns. The sort of the data management, the data quality and governance requirements, they differ a lot. Use cases we see across the board, right, across the entire trade life cycle, if you like. Evaluation, risk assessment, performance measurement, research, so specific things like maybe risk factor completion, proxying values, also proxying maybe ESG disclosures, right, from corporates, which is maybe a fairly new use case. But we also see cases in data quality statistics themselves and in data usage analytics to optimize the sourcing and the distribution of content internally. So tracking quality statistics from your suppliers, making sure you get the most out of your sourcing strategy. Again, I think what's relevant here is that the various use cases have different dependencies on the data they need, but maybe also different trade-offs between timeliness, accuracy, which differs a lot if you are whether you're in front office or whether you're in post-trade ops or in financial or risk reporting.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Sarah, may I bring you in here, please, to explain the extent to which firms are making data and analytics available to the business and how they're implementing analytics to deliver business value. It's something that we talk a lot about. How does it actually work?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, we've heard of sort of some introductory references there to kind of amount of data. And I think, data analytics is obviously not a new topic. It's been around for years, and there's been lots of hype about big data and organizations wanting to, get their hands on and harness all this data into one place and then kind of hope that they're going to find something from it. And I think what we're seeing now is a little bit of a more strategic approach. So organizations actually coming up with a data strategy, and thinking about where am I going as a firm, and therefore how can I align my data to help me get there. And so being a bit more selective about the data that they're going to bring in, to the point Martin made about properly cataloguing, having the metadata so you understand what you've got and where you can use it, rather than this, big data concept, which could obviously get you a little bit lost. So I think a big focus on strategy, and sort of aligning data to strategic objectives. And then taking that a step further, thinking about the implementation of that in the models, in the dashboards, having quite focused sort of data sets, if you like, for your analytics that meet very specific strategic objectives, and present that data to leaders to be able to very quickly hone in on what they're looking at and be able to make a decision. So I think that kind of data-driven strategic approach is really what we're seeing firms employ.
Okay, and are these analytics being shared, Sarah, between sort of the tech department and the business department? Is that working well?
That's certainly, I would say, the direction of travel, and I think it's the right direction of travel. Again, historically, I think we've had a lot of IT-led sort of projects, whether it's data projects or any IT project really, and they're not always as successful as they should be, because they don't have the business buy-in. So I think there's a real shift towards more business-led initiatives, where it's the stakeholders who are calling the shots, who are sponsoring the work, who are much more involved. So people aren't sitting in a dark room coding away for a few months and then saying, here you go. It's actually a much more two-way thing, with the business stakeholders being involved and commenting and continually improving, if you like, the models and the outputs.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And let's run another audience poll. The question this time: what are the challenges of achieving accurate, timely, and meaningful data analytics at your organization? And this time, you can tick as many of the boxes as you feel are appropriate. So please feel free to do that while I come to Sumi to talk about the challenges of achieving accurate, timely, and meaningful data analytics from a very much a practitioner's perspective. Sumi.
I think the most difficult activity initially is to get the data and getting it from the right place. The model, obviously, you need data to be able to tune it and make sure the right results are and outcome is achieved. And in a lot of cases, the analytics folks are spending 70 to 80% of their time actually trying to acquire the data itself versus actually working on the model. And so what I've seen a lot is, that the folks become data experts and in massaging and getting the aggregating the information together. And sometimes they do it really well, and then these are very smart people. But a lot of times, it does kind of go into this proliferation of data aggregate environments that become hard for the enterprise to manage. And then I think with the big data and cloud movement, we've replicated data everywhere, a lot more places, sometimes well-governed, sometimes not. And so to kind of come in last step to try and catalog it, it's been very difficult, especially to identify privacy information that could have been used in models as well. So one of the big challenges, managing, governing that data and making it available for the analytics in a nicely cataloged way is the focus right now.
Okay, Martin, what would you say there in terms of getting it right and turning out meaningful analytics?
Yeah, I think there are different challenges there. Right? I would say in a nutshell, you need a process and you need the tooling and services to go with it, and document the steps along the way so that the provenance, permissions, the quality grade are all clear, the overall fitness for purpose. I think a couple of challenges I would single out is to make sure you sort of build into that process that you build in feedback loops so that the sourcing and quality management is optimized through recurring feedback. Make it easy to provide and to collect and to act on feedback that you get from your users downstream. I think another point, maybe more for the front office, is that the half-life of some data sets used that goes into models, especially in active asset management, is short. So the cycle time of checking in and onboarding a new data set, working that data, and then either embedding it into a workflow or move on is shortening. And I would say on the operational side, as we get sort of more and deeper integration of analytics and some form of automated decision making, if you think about that sort of, I think it's from Gartner, that sort of classic model of 4 types of business analytics, from descriptive to diagnostic to predictive analytics to prescriptive analytics. I think we're sort of moving to the right side of that spectrum, at least in a lot of operations. You're sort of also automating the next step of automation, right? So, which of course can also introduce new risks if you don't keep track of what you're doing and how you provision your models.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, both. Let's see what our audience says. Let's see the poll results, if we may. Yes, legacy systems and data silos, they appear in a lot of poll questions. Little understanding of the data, poor data quality, lack of strong data governance, limited budget and buy-in, and nobody with no challenges. Sumi, can I ask you to comment on these stats?
It really sounds about right. The legacy systems, especially for the larger banks that have been around, or any organization that's been around for a while, there's a lot of mainframe data that's out there that's really hard to extract. And also depending on how your organization is structured, sometimes independently and siloed organization of data is okay actually, because maybe there isn't a crossover. But for the analysts or the risk and finance functions or even compliance to aggregate that together in a nomenclature that makes sense has been very challenging. Again, going into like the right categorization and inventory of that information is kind of the focus right now.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So still quite a lot of work to do there. And let me come back to you, Martijn. And could you start here on the sort of the data quality issues and governance, and talk a little bit about how firms can set up and drive improvement projects in support of more accurate and insightful analytics. And perhaps you'd like to touch on the benefits you mentioned earlier of getting data quality right and the penalties of getting it wrong in terms of analytics.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do so. Actually, it was interesting to see the poll results, the little understanding of data, which I think comes back to sort of a need to know your data, which seems pretty basic, but it's not always there. To your question, I mean, there's a concept that we use often called data quality intelligence, which is a method to identify, to measure and report back on data quality metrics, sort of building in that feedback loop. Both at the sort of source level and at the sort of the data set level and over different time horizons. I think the point there is to feed these metrics back both into maybe business rules and models that screen data or that act on data, and in some cases maybe autocorrect data, but also in your overall sourcing strategy. So you can improve over time, you can improve where you get your data, how you sort of label it, how you catalog it, and how you what you do before you hand it over to a model or some kind of automated decision making. As to projects that we see, improvement projects, they are often sort of driven by specific regulatory requirements. Sort of a while back, we had the TRIM review of the European Central Bank, which required data lineage before prices, in this case, went into valuation or risk models. We see ESG data as currently a driver, as many asset managers, asset owners start to prepare for the SFDR reporting and find they don't have all the data, so they need to source it, or they need to complete it internally. But also often these projects can be at the corporate level. If you run the numbers on operational improvements that come from sort of better decision making, a better way to operationalize data, sort of making your quants more productive, the point made by Sumi earlier. We can typically make an excellent business case for projects that focus on improving data quality and data provisioning to your end users. And I think, yeah, from sort of a cost-benefit analysis on the, I think it comes down to know your data. I think there's a long list of benefits of getting it right. In terms of getting it wrong, the negative impact of sort of models going off piste can be immense, right? If you think back to that Gartner scale of models with more and more automation creeping into workflows, if you don't sort out your data and your sort of quality grade, you can go over a cliff a lot faster. But that means you need to document what you do and what models you selected, and that you sort of keep track of what's going on, especially when you get into not just risk and evaluation, but say, for example, lending decisions, right? And approve or deny a loan, and these sort of things.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, I'm sure it's your responsibility not to go off piste. How do you see programs that can really support, better at data analytics, and what is the benefits of good data quality, obviously, and the dangers of poor data quality?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously Martin's touched there on sort of the data quality focus. I think in broader terms, actually, programs that focus on data literacy that really bring the entire organization into what's going on. So taking things down to a very base level and then making sure that everybody in the firm understands the importance of quality data, what that means for the outputs, understands their role, whether they create data, whether they use data, but really upskilling, the workforce. We're seeing quite a lot of companies really focus on data literacy, and it's across the board at all levels of the organization. So, as I say, making sure people understand their role, understand who owns data, understands the impact of bad data, understands the impact of badly modeled or bad calculations. For us in particular, when we're preparing reports and outputs for clients, it's critical that the data is correct. And so we as internally at RSM are putting quite a big investment in our data literacy program so that everyone feels involved and really understands how important quality data is. And alongside that goes the governance, the business processes that actually underpin the creation of data. So making sure that those are watertight, that data is being created consistently, it's complete, it's correct, someone's taking ownership.
Okay, that's great. Alex, this is obviously a speciality at Didactics. Tell us about the sort of ways you would go about this. And perhaps could you tell us a little bit about data quality doesn't have a sort of one level, it has different levels. How can people work on that to get their analytics right when they need different sorts of quality, so to speak?
Sure. I mean, I think Martin hit the nail on the head when he was talking about these feedback loops, and I think that is a real key part of it, that you understand that data governance is not data quality necessarily, but the two go hand in hand, and when you have the two together, you have a very powerful tool indeed. So we see that having the ability to view data quality metrics in data governance and lineage tools, for example, gives you real control to understand, is the data fit for purpose for the analytics that you're wanting to do with it? If there is something broken, you can easily do a root cause analysis and find out where it's broken, for example. With regards to implementing a data quality program, I mean, I think that's a whole webinar in itself that we actually may have done with the A-team group a while ago. But if there's one key thing I think that we've learned over the last decade or so in Didactics is the importance of having a self-service data quality model. And that means empowering data stewards to both measure and fix data themselves without going through the bottleneck of going through a central IT system. And that is indeed the overall design of the Didactics self-service data quality platform. On the benefits and penalties, I mean, obviously data quality is the foundation of good analytics, and if you get it right, then your analytics has got a strong foundation. But if you have bad data quality, it's not always evident. So you get that, yes, you get those data quality breaks which may break your analytics, and those are the things that most people think about. But there's the other level of bad data quality which doesn't necessarily break the analytics or the models, but it could give you false information. And a really good example of that is that recently at Didactics, we've been building some analytical knowledge graphs, analyzing patterns between linked companies and company directors on the UK Companies House dataset. And for that use case, it's very obvious that if you just take that raw data as it is from Companies House verbatim, your analytics can easily miss links between entities due to things like typos, misspellings, alternative spellings, abbreviations, things like that. But by performing extensive cleansing and normalization to the input data, you get a much fuller, accurate picture of analytics the time that you do the analytics. So you could potentially miss something completely silently, and that's got a big impact for, say, if you're using knowledge graphs in critical operations like KYC, you could actually miss that there's a whole legal entity that was, having a big impact on your risk score. So it's absolutely vital that you get the data quality right.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And staying with you, Alex, let's move on to look a little bit at data governance and how firms can set up and sustain consistent enterprise-wide governance that sort of adds controls to data and supports better analytics. Obviously, these two tend to go hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned there about integrating data quality with data governance and data lineage systems, and I think that is really important. But I think that what can sometimes be overlooked is this issue of generated data that analytics can produce and how that's used. So, for example, it might be that data scientists are writing algorithms to augment data or cleanse data, and the data points that they're creating are sort of like ungoverned, and it's vitally important that the data that they're creating is controlled and governed so that it's used for its intended purpose. So, for example, in the UK, back at the start of the year, I think we had a real world problem where there was a plane took off from the UK bound to Spain, and it took off overloaded, and it was overloaded because the algorithms that calculate how much fuel it should have had miscalculated how much fuel it had miscalculated the weight of the plane. Because to calculate the weight of the plane, they'd looked at the number of passengers and then looked at the titles of the passengers, and it was looking at the title, and if it picked up miss, then it was assuming that it was a child and attributing a child's weight, an average child's weight, to that. And of course, that wasn't the case. So the algorithm basically miscalculated the weight of the plane, and subsequently the amount of fuel was incorrect. So it was actually quite a serious incident. But it just shows you that if you are using analytics to generate data like that you need to use them for those data for the intended purpose.
Okay, thank you very much. Sumi, this is obviously something that you're embedded in at the moment. And tell us a little bit about how you see using data governance and controls to support better analytics.
A lot of cases I see data governance and controls implemented disjointed from the implementation process, or like projects in general. Most firms fund and implement data solutions via projects. So what I have seen most best implementation of data governance is to be part of that. Again, early stage during the requirements gathering even, to bake in the controls and processes associated with making sure that the data is cataloged and defined and accuracy is measured. And also at the same time, that's the technology implementation. I like to also see data governance embedded into the operational controls. There's a lot of data gets created by operations for the most part. There are the folks that input the information, and baking those controls into that operational step by step, I think really kind of alleviates a lot of the downstream quality issues that we see a lot.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And I see we have some audience questions come in. And okay, let me put this one to you, Sarah, and see if you like it. We have huge volumes of data. Some of it is probably out of date and some is probably not very useful. How can we be sure we're using timely and useful data for our analytics?
Yeah, and I don't suppose that's uncommon with most organisations, really. And I think it comes back to this concept of taking a step back and defining a strategy. So understanding what you're trying to achieve as a business. What are your 3-year, 5-year, 10-year goals? And how would you measure them? Forget the data for a minute, but how would you measure them? If someone said you're going to reduce costs, you're going to increase revenues, what's the measure? And then think about and identify the data you need. So don't start with the data, because there's bound to be data in there that is out of date, irrelevant, isn't useful to your cause. So first of all, go with your strategy, identify the data, and then look in your data set and find that data. That doesn't mean that data is going to be good. You still need to then go through the process of assessing its quality. Where did it come from? Who created it? Tracking it back. But at least you're starting with something quite specific rather than an entire enormous data set where you don't know where to start.
Okay, so sort of start small, but make sure you've got the right things and then move out from there. Thank you very much indeed. And here's one for you, Alex. We're working to bring static data, dynamic data, and real time together in analytics. What are your thoughts on how we approach this?
Wow, that's a big one, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I mean, one key thing there is you have three different sources of data, and you need to think about how you're going to join those sources together. And I'll talk more about that a bit later on, hopefully. I mean, that was one of the key items on one of the poll questions was data silos. And this isn't necessarily data silos, but it's definitely 3 different kinds of data that you're talking about. It is a big challenge, and not having common identifiers between data sets is also a challenge, and it means that you end up very often having to do all sorts of matching operations on fields that don't have common identifiers. So you end up doing things like fuzzy matching on address data, on entity name data, maybe instrument name data, and things like that, in order to bring these data sets together. So really, you need a platform that can handle both streaming data and reference data, and has good access to APIs in order to be able to ingest all these data sources seamlessly.
Okay. Martijn, would you like to add anything to that from a point of view bringing a lot of data together, which is something that you do?
Yeah, I think Alex made a number of, excellent points. I mean, the sort of cross-referencing can be thorny, but if the sort of fields on which you want to base your cross-referencing identification are incomplete, then you have to rely or resort to fuzzy matching. Indeed, what you see often is that some solutions focus really on sort of high-end time series performance that maybe miss the reference data aspect. But you need both, right? Because without reference data and without the contextual information, you need the content and the context for effective decision making. So I think that's probably one of the main challenges in sort of crunching the data and bringing the data. Maybe just also to reiterate the earlier poll question. Still a bit surprised at that sort of top score for the siloed data, because to me a siloed sort of data infrastructure means a lack of process, right? If you don't have a process, then you end up with every man for himself and silos everywhere. So a little bit surprised that it's still that high a score.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Sumi, last question for the moment, and again, it's on data governance. It says, we need to improve our data governance to achieve stronger analytics. Where should we start, and where should we go once we've started?
This is where the mantra of a CDO that I was working for a while ago that I liked a lot was that one sentence. I want to know where my data is, where it's coming from, and ultimately I have access to it. So basically, I want to know where my data is. It's the simplest question, but yet most difficult question in a lot of ways. And so I think data governance as a helper organization. We should be helping the analytics folks and helping the reporting and the functional regulatory bodies are asking for a lot of data lineage and data. Where it comes from, how it's defined, am I reporting the right thing? So ultimately, just getting that information right and getting that organizational help to making the implementations correct is kind of the mantra that I like to go by. So ultimately, creating an inventory catalog. I know I keep repeating this, but it's like the number one step in knowing where your information is, and so that's kind of like the focus for first step for a lot of data governance initiatives.
Okay, and as Sarah said, with lots and lots of data sources and some good, some bad, presumably if you're just starting out, you start small.
Yes, scoping is quite, so most organizations have thousands and thousands of applications, and in a lot of ways, many warehouses, many ODSs, many aggregate data reporting, analytic stores. So getting kind of a prioritization of what sources to govern first and decipher first, I think is really important. Obviously, regulatory requirements are first out of the gate. Privacy right now is very up and coming in terms of making sure that data set is managed appropriately.
Okay, thank you for taking those questions, and let's move back to our questions, if we may. So coming back to you, Sarah, to talk about the types of technologies, techniques, tools, solutions, services, and so on that are very key to successful analytics. Is it all in-house? Is it a mixture? What do you think?
It's a massive question, this one, and it sounds a bit of a cliche, but there isn't a one size fits all, because there are so many tools and technologies out there. There's loads of solutions, and I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record, but it comes back to your strategy and where you are on your data analytics journey. And I tend to split this into kind of the three classic areas. So technology, people, and process. So if you think about your technology, what do you already have? Do you already have a data repository, a data warehouse, a data lake? If you do, does it contain all the data that you need? If it doesn't, where is that data? So back to some of the previous comments from Sumi, where's the data? And Alex, how do I connect to it? Are there APIs? How do I get that data out? Because those kind of questions are going to drive the answer, which will drive the solution or the tool that you're going to use. So it's very much about that strategy. What do you want to do? And then breaking it down into increments. So that's kind of on the technology side of things. And if you don't have a data warehouse or you don't have any tools, then what's your IT strategy? What's your preference for on-premise, cloud, hybrid? What are your preferences around vendors? Because all organizations will have those. So again, that's going to drive some of the decisions that are made. But equally important is the people side of things. So what's right for the organization? What's right for your people? There are loads of different tools out there. And so depending on the level of data literacy will determine what kind of model you go for, a centralized versus decentralized, how much reliance on a central IT team versus that kind of self-service approach that I think Alex mentioned earlier. That will decide as well, or determine, or help you determine which tools are right for you. So I think it's all about asking those questions and defining the strategy. And then finally, that process piece is around the processes that create the data. So how well governed your business processes are, how much confidence have people got in the data, because that will determine whether you're happy to let your organization loose with some self-service tools, help yourselves, or actually, no, we need a bit more of central coordination because we want to make sure that we serve that data up in the right way so that people aren't making wrong decisions on the back of it.
Okay, thank you. Alex, you mentioned some of these things earlier. What would you say here in terms of use of tech solutions, services, and so on to support analytics?
Sure. Well, I think the self-service revolution is definitely key to this, and we're certainly seeing a lot more in the way of self-service analytics and vendors providing self-service analytics. And I suppose hand in hand with that goes self-service data quality as well. But I think when it comes to analytics, if you are going to go down the self-service route, then and move away from centrally managed by IT, then a key thing you need to consider is how you is providing data abstractions or APIs into whatever data source that you're providing the analytics for, and that's so that your analytics doesn't break. So if someone creates a really nice normalized table and puts it up on Azure somewhere, and then people start building dashboards on top of that, that's great and all good. But then if someone goes and changes those fields in that table, it's going to break a whole lot of stuff. So if you're going down the self-service route, you need to think of some sort of abstraction layer or API that you can put in place to allow people to access data safely without the risk of downstream analytics breaking. And then perhaps something that's overlooked in this context, but I think we've seen is clearly evident, is that analytics usually relies on good matching of disparate data sets, joining data sets together. So for example, at Datatactics, we recently implemented an analytics project to perform complex analytics on the impact of COVID-19 on UK businesses. To do that, we used 18 data sets from the Office of National Statistics, local government departments, etc., all in different formats. And the success of that project wasn't really in the analytics stage. It was really in the pipelines that we built to bring those data sets together, normalize them, and join them. For example, linking data sets where you've got a postcode in one, a city in another, a national jurisdiction in another file, and understanding how those different attributes relate to each other so that you can link the data sets together. That is absolutely key, that you can link the data together.
And how best would you do that?
Well, I would say that you need a platform that specializes in data quality and matching, and you can check out datatactics.com for that. But seriously, I think that the matching process can be drastically oversimplified and overlooked. In reality, data matching is quite complex, and you also need to have good processes around what you do when you have data that falls below certain match thresholds and things like that, and you have processes in place to deal with all those exceptions, which probably isn't the place to discuss today, but it's a vitally important part of any data pipeline.
Okay. Well, so on this question, Sumi and Sarah, would you make any comment on that? Is this something you do in-house, or would you need third-party services to do this, or is it something you can still do in-house, the data matching?
We are using vendor solutions for the actual matching logic process, but there's ultimately some human component to that at the end of the day. The analytics can suggest certain things, but the experience behind the implementations isn't necessarily codable. And also the legacy information that exists in people's heads, it's quite hard to document. So we use kind of right now we're going with a strategy of both. But what I also wanted to mention is self-service analytics. Yes, self-service governance is also something that we're dabbling with right now as we go federated. There's I know this is a totally different, more involved topic, but just want to kind of throw that out there as an option for applying analytics to that. Okay,
Sarah, would you like to add anything to that one in terms of your practice?
I think I'd just echo what Sumi just said, actually, that we're using a variety of tools that are part of our tech stack, but it never gets us away from needing that human kind of final sign off, if you like, and you probably get to, if we're lucky, 70-80% of a match, and then the rest kind of needs to be done. And unfortunately, you just can't get away from that. People are always looking for that quick fix, automated solution. Nobody wants to do any work and actually sit and look at the data, but at some point that is necessary if you really want the quality and the outputs that you're looking for.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And I think we just about have time for a final audience poll. So you'll be seeing that on your screens now. And the question is, to what extent is your organization using machine learning to drive analytics? And Martijn, can I come to you first to talk a little bit about how machine learning and AI are being used in analytics, and whether this all takes analytics to the next level? And obviously there are problems around things like explainability. How do you see this, and how do you see it developing?
Yeah, great question. I think contrasting analytics versus sort of machine learning and AI, I think to an extent it's terminology. I mean, there's certainly advances in models, but there's also a lot of, I think, classical models, classical methods used. But yeah, I think the availability of models via commonly used libraries and more resources makes the use more common. I think in the field of machine learning, the concept of data quality is evolving as well. There are specific demands on data quality and data preparation so that the models work best. Obviously, you need to know the data and bring in your own sort of your heuristics. I think this was just discussed, but there may be some new aspects of prepping data, like the whole discipline of feature engineering, like selecting the right aspects, maybe stripping out highly correlated data in different time series, alignment of frequency, completing gaps and all this sort of thing, which you need to do first, get the model to work best. And then the explainability problem, again, it starts with the data, having the lineage capabilities to trace it back to the sources, so you can explain where you got the basic data from. And then as to the model itself, it depends on what you use, whether you can actually reverse engineer or explain how you got to a certain point, right? So maybe I'm a customer of a fund servicer, and I want to see why my exposure was marked as a certain level, or maybe why my loan application was denied. I need the data sources, I need the model. In some cases, it won't be possible if you use a neural net. If it's a black box, that won't be applicable for every use case. I think maybe somewhat ironically, I think somebody mentioned regulators earlier on. I think for regulators too, there's a new world, right? They have demanded a lot more information, or there's the legal background that gives them a lot more information. They are inundated with data. They are moving to data-driven supervision. They are also adopting sort of models to work the data they get and to filter out what's deviating and sort of what's germane to their tasks.
Okay, Alex, where do you see AI and ML coming in here? Thanks. No, still can't hear you. You're on mute.
I'm the first one. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
AI and ML.
Yeah, just to continue the topic of explainability that Martin introduced there, I do think it's an interesting one. Our head of AI at Data sits on the Bank of England Public-Private Forum, advising the regulator on AI, and it's something that it often comes up as a topic for discussion. And I think I, along with many people, wouldn't be surprised if we start to see tighter regulation on the use of AI, and in particular mandates on explainability in many use cases. Explainability is an interesting one because I think it happens primarily on two levels, and perhaps for two different reasons as well. One is the sort of like at the business level, where you want to be able to inform a business user who might be using the application in real time, why a decision was made in a business-friendly kind of way. So that might be, in order to do that, I know at Data Tactics we would use a different algorithm in order to do that. So perhaps look back at previous data and say, well, we're making this this prediction because it looks like these are the cases, and a business user can understand that. But then you also need to have that very data science kind of approach to it. So you surface all of the data science statistics that a data scientist would need in order to be able to clearly understand why a model has made that prediction, if it is at all possible, so they can tweak the models and explain to regulators if something has gone wrong. And of course, as Martin said, with a lot of neural net models, that explainability just isn't there, and you have to resort to other methods in order to do that. But it should be something that is built in right from the start in your analytics and not just bolted on as an afterthought.
Okay, Sarah, as a practitioner, is this something that you're doing or looking at?
Yes, starting to, I would say, certainly with our clients that tend to be a bit more sort of mid-market, that this is still quite new, the area of AI and ML. But one of the areas we're seeing quite a lot of interest is around sort of sentiment analysis and using AI to really understand their client base and understand what's being said on, out in the marketplace to see if they can drive spot opportunities, get competitive advantage. And I think, obviously the algorithms and the explainability and sort of the ethics around it is all critical. But I think we're also seeing that some of the BI tools on the market have got increasingly inbuilt AI functionality, which is a bit more rigid and probably a bit safer. So it's less of a scary thing. And I think, some of our clients are starting to, dabble with that sentiment analysis, but built into the BI tools they're using rather than developing their own.
Okay, thank you. Let's see what our audience says. There you go. Martijn, and Alex, you comment on that one, as you might expect.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of, I think most people say that they're using machine learning to a small extent. I think it's starting to become ubiquitous. As Sarah mentioned there, that these days you are getting tools that have AI solutions built into them. And so even if you don't know that you're using ML, it's a good chance that you might be somewhere.
Yeah, that's very true. As you say, it will come along one way or another, I guess. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's move on. And coming back to you, Sarah, what are the business and operational benefits of effective, efficient, and also accessible analytics?
Yeah, lots and lots and lots. But I tend to sort of split these into sort of external customer facing kind of or commercial benefits, and then those that are a bit more internal and operational. So some of the classic things that we work on both internally and with our clients on the commercial side of things will be back to that sentiment analysis. So understanding customers, what do they need, what do they want? People are increasingly looking to tailor experiences for customers. So obviously that's very much based on customer data and understanding their customers, but also understanding the products and the services that you're providing, which of them perform well, which are perhaps not performing well, not just how much are you selling, but are they really profitable? What are the leakage points? It's all very well selling lots of something, but if you're then having 50% of it returned or having to sell at such a discount that there's no profit, that's maybe not the best use of your kind of organization. So really honing in on what's good, what's core to your business, and then also looking broader outside of your business to the marketplace. So finding out what your competitors are doing, looking for those trends in the market to see if you can gain a competitive advantage. If you can spot an opportunity and act quickly on it, you're going to reap the benefits. So loads of applications on the commercial side, but equally internally, using data to understand, your workforce. What do they, again, sentimentally, what do they like? What do they need? But also maybe opportunities for training and development, looking at the throughput of a department. And this isn't in the sort of, big brothers watching you looking to point fingers. It's very much, well, a certain team are doing things in a certain way and they are achieving X, and another team is doing something a bit different and they're achieving Y. Well, what does that tell us? And therefore, is there a training opportunity? Similarly, on your operations and your supply chain, what's your total cost to serve? What's the best or the optimum location to store your product, to distribute your product from and to, information about your suppliers. What are they charging? What's their delivery accuracy, etc. There are just so many applications, and all of these things will bring benefits. And I haven't even really touched on just the pure, the financials, the KPIs about how are you performing against plan, your risk assessment, your controls. All of these are going to give benefits. But again, it's got to be linked back to your strategic objectives. I think that's the key point.
Okay, thank you. Martijn, what would you say here?
I think this is an excellent overview from Sarah. I mean, I would probably turn it around and say that you don't really have a choice to sort of not have effective, efficient, and accessible analytics, if only because of the sheer volume of data to be worked. Of course, you need humans, but you can't have only humans without the proper support. So I think it's a necessary precondition for anyone in financial services. As to the benefits, I think a lot were mentioned. Improved quality of decision making, bringing actionable metrics, insights to users, allowing that business user self-service that we touched upon, faster cycle time in onboarding data sets, in deploying and testing and new models. I think again the precondition is to have that sort of data quality management on individual data items, products, clients, counterparties, trading venues, but also on the data set level, so that everyone knows what sources are available, the cataloging that we discussed, and then per data set, make it clear what the permitted use is, right? Where does it sit? What is the update frequency? So that it is not sort of suddenly becomes stale or turns out to be stale. Who owns it? Who can access it? That's the whole thing, governance side. I think that capability and the decision making to add and remove data sets from the catalog is I guess key part of good data governance, and then to do it in a time frame that works for the stakeholders. And many firms, they have a very sort of overcrowded change agenda as it is, which is I guess why we see an increasing shift to managed data services as the sort of default sourcing model to outsource part of that sort of data collection capability, and then have the internal guys sort of focus more on selecting the right models and testing the right models.
Okay, thank you. So pulling all that together, I'm going to raise the last question of today's webinar, and it is what advice would our experts give to data practitioners working on data analytics? And Sumi, would you like to start?
To sum it up, I like to ask myself all the time as we get deep dive into different data initiatives and policies and setting standards and whatnot. The question is, are we being helpful? And ultimately, a data organization is a service, and so we are supposed to help get the data, understand the data, and then find our cohorts in consumption of that data. So are we helpful in anything that we're doing, whether it be documentation or be implementation? Is kind of I guess what I'd like to advise myself actually on the journey.
Okay, thank you, Martijn.
Yeah, I'll keep it very short. I think it comes down to me to the sort of business or information management 101. So first, I guess know your data, right? So the content and the context. Know your models. So don't pick a black box model where it's inappropriate. So pick the suitable model for the occasion. And then of course, knowing your business. The last one is what kind of heuristics you bring in how you combine your analytics and your data sets. So know the data, know the models, and know the context in which you combine the two.
Thank you. And Alex.
I'll keep it short as well. Get the data quality right. Build on a strong foundation of good data quality, and get the governance right. So make sure that the data is being used as intended, and remember that analytics can generate data. So, and as such, make sure that generated data gets the appropriate governance too. Okay.
And Sarah, some final words from you, please.
Sure. So I think I would counsel on the change management and awareness side of things. So kind of in parallel with any of the technical activities, make sure that you've got that communication program training, bringing everybody in and involving them. I think we've all made the point about kind of building in increments, so breaking work down so that business stakeholders can see value quickly and sort of course correct if it's not what they were expecting. And then just my final comment, just link to your strategic objectives.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to all our speakers for sharing their expertise and experience. And thank you too to Alveo and Didactics for sponsoring today's webinar. It's been a good conversation. Before we close up, just a quick note that if you scroll down your screen to additional options, you'll see some A-team resources that might be useful You can download our 2020-2021 regulatory handbook or our ESG handbook, which we just produced earlier this year. And you can register for one of our next webinars on managing unstructured data to ensure regulatory compliance and add value. On the topic of ESG, we've launched a new content service called ESG Insight, which is dedicated to environmental, social, and governance issues, including data sourcing, data management, standards, risks, reporting, and everything you might expect, and more. On your screen, you can see a link there that will take you there, but you can just go to the main site as well and begin to read the channel. It's really building up already, so I hope you enjoy that. That said, that's it for today. So thank you again to Sarah, Sumi, Martijn, and Alex, and thank you to all of you who have taken part in the webinar. Please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again, everybody.